Hi and welcome, I'm Andy Miochin. You are watching A News. Here are the headlines. Russia says the second round of direct peace talks with Ukraine will be held in Istanbul on June 2nd. Lachin hosts a trilateral summit of Azerbaijan, Turkey and Pakistan. The new international airport officially inaugurated. More than 1 million Muslims streamed to the holy city of Mecca ahead of the annual Hajj pilgrimage. Thank you for tuning in. The second round of direct Russia-Ukraine peace negotiations will be held in Istanbul on June 2nd, according to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said during his visit to Berlin that Kyiv is still waiting for Moscow's memorandum on how it saw the future of peace talks.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced that the next round of direct talks with Ukraine will take place in Istanbul on June 2nd. Ankara has reiterated its readiness to host these talks, with Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan expressing commitment to facilitating peace between the two nations. Officials confirmed Ankara's readiness to host the negotiations.
Russia preferring Istanbul for direct negotiations with Ukraine is a reflection of the mutual understanding of our countries regarding the establishment of stability.
Turkey's foreign minister will travel to Kyiv on Thursday for a 2-day visit after discussing peace efforts to end Russia-Ukraine war in Moscow earlier this week, Turkish Foreign Ministry confirmed. US officials suggested that Geneva could serve as the venue for future talks, highlighting Switzerland's traditional neutrality and infrastructure for high-level diplomacy. Russia has rejected the Vatican as a serious venue for talks, citing non-neutral behaviour and limited logistical capacity. However, no agreement has been finalised. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Berlin to meet with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. The two leaders discussed continued German support for Ukraine and efforts toward a ceasefire.
Unsere Verteidigungsminister werden heute eine Absichtserklärung.
Today, our defence ministers will sign a declaration of intent on the procurement of long-range weapons systems from Ukrainian production, so-called long-range fires. There will be no range limitation. This will enable Ukraine to defend itself fully, including against military targets outside its own territory.
Auch gegen militärische Ziele außerhalb des eigenen.
Today, two sides will sign respective documents which will mark the beginning of financing of the new projects. These new projects already exist. We just want them to be in the amount that we need. The first steps on financing the projects will be taken today.
In the United States, President Donald Trump warned Russian President Vladimir Putin against further escalation in Ukraine, stating that he is playing with fire. Trump also mentioned ongoing dialogue with Putin, suggesting progress toward a peace memorandum and ceasefire agreement. The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said it was clear the Trump administration is making considerable efforts towards a peaceful settlement and that Russia was grateful for the mediation efforts of President Trump personally. But Peskov said, just like the United States, Russia has its own national interests.
The UN condemned a controversial US and Israel-backed aid distribution group operating in Gaza after chaotic scenes at a food distribution site in Rafah. Thousands of Palestinians rushed the aid point run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in the south of the Strip just hours after the GHF announced it began distributing food, the first aid following a nearly 3-month blockade. The UN Human Rights Office has said it believes 47 people were injured. A senior official said the organization is still gathering information, but that most of the injuries were due to gunshots and that it was shooting from the IDF. The Israeli military denied the accusations, saying that its troops only fired warning shots in the air. As the war in Gaza passed its 600-day mark, protesters in Tel Aviv demanded the return of the presumed 58 remaining hostages in the Strip. They called on U.S. President Donald Trump to help stop the war and return the hostages.
On a Tel Aviv beach, families and activists created a large yellow ribbon to honor those still held captive in Gaza. It marks 600 days since the war began, and many of the participants accuse the Israeli government of neglecting the hostages and demand immediate global action. Families also say the pain of waiting continues to weigh heavily.
Today marks 600 days. 600 days since 58 innocent people were kidnapped by Hamas and dragged into the tunnels of Gaza. 600 days of darkness, 600 days without freedom, 600 days of abandonment. The hostages, our family members, have endured horrific, inhumane conditions. The longer they remain underground, the more danger they face, and this suffering extends beyond them. The people of Gaza are victims too, held hostage by Hamas rule and the extended, sad war.
We cry out to President Trump, you are the only one who can act to stop the vengeance war and ensure the return of all, both the living for rehabilitation and the fallen for burial. Know this, Mr. President, we are the majority of the people, the majority who say that returning the hostages is the first priority. A part of stopping the death and suffering on both sides. Use your power and determination to achieve peace and bring our loved ones home.
Hamas says it is ready to release all remaining hostages and agree to a permanent ceasefire if Israel withdraws completely from Gaza. Israel has rejected the offer, insisting the war must continue until Hamas is dismantled. Meanwhile, Hamas has called for global protests from the 30th of May to the 1st of June to take action against the ongoing violence and blockade in Gaza. Since the 2nd of March, Israel has blocked food, medical and humanitarian aid from entering Gaza, worsening the humanitarian crisis. This has raised international concern and calls for urgent relief and a ceasefire.
At least 5 people were killed and another 19 injured in an explosion at a chemical plant in China's Shandong. 6 more people are considered missing. Mahnur Makhdoom reports from Beijing.
A powerful explosion rocked the Gomi Yodao chemical plant in Weifang City of China's Shandong province. The blast occurred just before noon and caused a massive fire with thick smoke blowing into the sky visible from miles away. The explosion shattered windows up to 3 kilometers away and caused significant structural damage. The chemical plant is specialized in producing substances used in pesticides and pharmaceuticals. It was established in 2019 and employed more than 500 workers. Over 230 emergency personnel responded swiftly, working to contain the fire and search for survivors. Authorities have already begun environmental monitoring to check for toxic releases and have advised nearby residents to wear masks. The cause of the explosion remains under investigation. However, the event has sparked renewed calls for stricter safety enforcement at hazardous industrial sites across China. Manu Makhdoom, A News, Beijing, China.
The Gulf Cooperation Council, China, and the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations held their inaugural Trilateral meeting in Kuala Lumpur and agreed to, quote, chart a unified and collective path. Joining us from Lisbon to briefly talk on the Malaysia gathering is international business consultant George Costa Oliveira. Welcome, thank you for being with us. For starters, what do you make of the GCC and China attending the ASEAN summit? We've heard that they are trying to strengthen their cooperation when it comes to free trade.
Well, first of all, I think that the Prime Minister of Malaysia should be complimented. It's a great idea. I think it was his initiative. And I think on the one hand, it involves interests of ASEAN, which are obvious. They already are one of the main economic blocs of the world. At this stage, most people have no idea, but they are the most important bloc that trades with China, where China exports more. They are now, last year or 2 years ago, they overtook the European Union and the United States as the main destination for Chinese exports. But they are still, and these are economies that are growing very, very fast. And one of the things they need is capital. So it's normal that if you have an opportunity, that you invite also a part of the world, another economic bloc that has surplus of capital and that is eager to find new business opportunities to come and to reinforce ties. And I think that's the main purpose of this initiative of Anwar Ibrahim. That deserves to be complimented for this. It's a great idea, and I think this is not going to stay here. I think we're going to see more initiatives involving these entities. And obviously, in geopolitical terms, it means that the current situation where we have, a new patron of protectionism arising in the United States is getting a response from several other economic blocs that want very much to continue to benefit from multilateralism and free trade in as much as possible. So I think we have these two components, and I think this is the outcome of both of them.
Well, when you say benefiting from free trade, how about China? How important would you say this is for Beijing, given the current circumstances, of course, and the paused trade war with Washington?
Well, ASEAN and the GCC markets are very important for China. If we compare the current tariff war and trade war that Trump has launched with the first one in 2017, China is not only more prepared, but it clearly prepared the way for this. China is has diversified its export markets many years ago, and the GCC market is growing, but the ASEAN bloc is really, really relevant for China in two ways. On the one hand, in terms of trade, because it's exporting more and more towards these countries, but also in terms of delocalizing part of the Chinese production in the last years. Urban China became very expensive in terms of wages, in terms of rents, in terms of other costs. So it's normal that Chinese companies leave to other places, especially places that have large internal markets that are growing very, very, very fast. If at the same time their banks and the capital goes along with them, this will not stop here. The GCC is a smaller market, much smaller market, but it is a very interesting market in terms of large projects on the one hand, energy projects on the other, and in terms of partnerships towards targeting together third geographies like South America and Africa. So yes, China is very, very much interested, and it's normal that it will continue to be interested in participating and even taking the initiative or fostering or catalyzing initiatives of this kind.
Well, George, thank you so much for joining us and offering your insights. Now, in other news, the European Union lifted economic sanctions on Syria in an effort to support the country's transition and recovery after the toppling of former President Bashar al-Assad. The European Council said that sanctions relating to the previous government and restrictions on security grounds will remain.
The European Union has adopted legal acts aimed at lifting all economic restrictive measures on Syria. The decision aims at supporting the Syrian people in reuniting and rebuilding a new and peaceful Syria. It does not, however, include sanctions imposed on individuals linked to the former President Bashar al-Assad. The EU has also removed 24 entities, including the Central Bank of Syria, from its list of those subject to sanctions. Vice President of the European Commission, Kaja Kallas, has called the decision a right move and reaffirmed the bloc's support for the people of Syria. Last week, the United States government also announced orders to lift sanctions on Syria. It released what it calls the GL25 license, which authorises transactions previously prohibited and enables new investment and private sector activity. Syria's foreign ministry has welcomed the move by the EU, describing it as a positive indication for stronger cooperation and long-term stability.
United States President Donald Trump says he has warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to take military action against Iran that could disrupt Washington's ongoing nuclear negotiations with Tehran. Trump said he told Netanyahu that strikes would be very inappropriate because a solution is very close. He added that that could change at any moment, but that he believes Iran wants to make a deal that would save many lives.
Respond a little bit differently, but
The US and Iran have so far held 5 rounds of talks in both Muscat and Rome. Despite positive descriptions of the Omani-mediated negotiations, a true breakthrough is yet to be seen.
It's one of the world's most high-stakes and fragile diplomatic standoffs. The United States and Iran locked in a cycle of nuclear threats, sanctions, and negotiations. And once again, Donald Trump is pushing for a deal. But why?
what the Americans want, first and foremost, is to be able to remove any threat that may come from the Iranian nuclear program. But what the Iranians want, obviously, is for economic sanctions to be lifted.
In 2015, after years of negotiations, Iran agreed to curb its nuclear activity in exchange for sanction relief, and tensions eased.
It is a great honor for us to announce that we have reached an agreement on the Iranian nuclear issue.
But just 3 years later, President Donald Trump walked away from that deal, calling it the worst ever, and reimposed crippling sanctions.
In a few moments, I will sign a presidential memorandum to begin reinstating U.S. nuclear sanctions on the Iranian regime. America will not be held hostage to nuclear blackmail.
In response, Iran restarted its nuclear program, enriching uranium to levels closer than ever to weapons grade.
Iran's uranium enrichment level will not be limited to 20%. We may increase enrichment up to 60%.
The International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran now has enough material, if further enriched, to build several bombs. But weaponizing it is another challenge.
Having nuclear-grade uranium, or indeed weapons-grade uranium, or indeed a nuclear bomb, is not necessarily sufficient. You need to be able to deliver this bomb. And Iran's Islamic Republic is currently very limited.
Fast forward now, and the clock is ticking. The risk of military conflict is rising, and Trump, once a deal breaker, is suddenly open to diplomacy.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious.
Iran's economy is collapsing under sanctions. Talks may be one of the few options left.
For Iran, the issue of the economy is significant. For the United States, it's very difficult to tell what exactly Donald Trump thinks. There is this idea that he wants to clear the deck.
And if talks fail?
But with Iran, if it requires military, we're going to have military.
The US is adamant that if these talks fail, there will be an attack on Iran.
Diplomats are rushing between capitals like Tehran, Muscat, and Moscow, seeking any glimmer of a breakthrough.
My guess is they can't rely on Russia in terms of an all-out war, in terms of supporting them with military, and they know that.
And amid all this, it's ordinary Iranians who are paying the highest price and dreading what comes next.
For ordinary people, the scenarios are quite grim if they look at war. The economic situation is so dire that even the continuation of the current stalemate is not something they can survive with.
So why does Donald Trump want to deal with Iran? to avoid a war, to secure a foreign policy win, or simply because time is running out.
Iran's foreign minister has threatened to end all talks with European officials over its nuclear program after the UK ambassador to Washington gave remarks at the Atlantic Council, suggesting that London is siding with Washington's calls to eliminate Iran's uranium enrichment facilities. Artura Shiralilu has more.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has warned the UK government over adopting a zero enrichment policy towards Tehran's nuclear program. In a message on his X account, Foreign Minister Araghchi issued a stern warning to the UK, saying nothing would be left to discuss if London demanded Tehran to cease its nuclear enrichment program. He said if the UK's position is zero enrichment in Iran, which is a clear violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, as well as the UK's commitments as a remaining member of the JCPOA, then there is no longer any subject for discussion between us on the nuclear file, he wrote on his X account. The warning was issued after the British ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, said in a speech at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C., that Britain strongly supports U.S. President Donald Trump's initiative in negotiating away the enrichment and related facilities in Iran. Araghchi reacted to Mandelson's remarks and said, Iran has continued to engage in good faith with the UK and the remaining European parties to the JCPOA, even as the United States still shows no willingness to involve them in the ongoing negotiations process. In addition to the Iran E3 talks, Tehran has held 5 rounds of indirect negotiations with the US, mediated by the Omani Foreign Ministry since April, after President Trump wrote a letter in March to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Last week, Araghchi strongly cautioned Europe it will bear significant consequences if the UN nuclear sanctions are reimposed against Tehran, after senior Iranian, French, German, and UK diplomats met in Istanbul in mid-May without a major breakthrough. In an interview with the Saudi-based Arabic language TV Ash-Sharq News, he said that a reinstallment of the UN sanctions under the nuclear deal signed in Vienna in 2015, also known as the JCPOA, will terminate participation of the E3 parties, France, Germany, and the UK, in the agreement. Trilateral, reporting for A-News TV, Tehran.
More than 1 million Muslims have streamed into the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia ahead of the start of the annual Hajj pilgrimage, scheduled between June 4th and 9th.
Muslims from all around the world have begun arriving in the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia to attend the 2025 Hajj pilgrimage season. The Grand Mosque, Masjid al-Haram, is experiencing significant overcrowding, with hundreds of thousands of worshippers filling the mosque day and night. Officials say more than 1 million Muslim pilgrims from around the world have already arrived in the country. Pilgrims, dressed in traditional white ihram garments, are performing the tawaf, circling the Kaaba, marking the beginning of their sacred journey. To ensure safety and order, Saudi authorities have implemented stringent entry regulations. As of April 29th, only individuals with valid Hajj permits, Mecca residency, or official work authorization are allowed entry into the city. Violations can result in fines up to 20,000 Saudi riyals, which is approximately $5,330, deportation, and a 10-year entry ban. Hajj, the fifth pillar of Islam, is a mandatory religious duty for Muslims who are physically and financially capable. This year, over 1 million worshippers from diverse backgrounds have gathered in Mecca, united in their simple white ihram garments, a symbol of equality and piety in Islam. The pilgrimage reenacts the trials of Prophet Ibrahim, his wife Hajar, and their son Ismail. Key rituals include standing at the plains of Arafat, where the Prophet Muhammad delivered his final sermon, and the symbolic stoning of the devil at Jamarat, representing Ibrahim's rejection of Satan's temptations. The Hajj culminates with Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice, where Muslims worldwide perform Qurbani, which means animal sacrifice in remembrance of Ibrahim's devotion to Allah. Authorities are managing the dense crowds with increased security and logistical support to ensure pilgrims' safety. The Saudi Red Crescent Authority has confirmed the deployment of 900 ambulances to serve millions of pilgrims during Hajj 2025.
On Azerbaijan's Independence Day, the leaders of Azerbaijan, Turkey and Pakistan gathered in Lachin for a trilateral summit. Azerbaijani and Turkish presidents Ilham Aliyev and Recep Tayyip Erdogan also officially inaugurated the international Lachin airport. Our Orhan Amashov has all the details.
Hello, I'm joining you from the Lachin district in the Eastern Gaza economic region of Azerbaijan, and today has been a day of gargantuan symbolic and political importance, not just in terms of the history of Azerbaijan, but also in the wider history involving Turkey, Azerbaijan and Pakistan. Yesterday, Pakistan's Prime Minister Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif arrived in Lachin, and he held bilateral talks with his Azerbaijani counterpart. Before coming to Azerbaijan, he was in Turkey and Iran, and this tour of his is considered to be a part of a wider regional trip, by means of which he's, in view of many analysts, paying his tribute to those three countries that have supported Pakistan in the light of that conflict with India regarding the issue of Kashmir. But of course, this issue, this wider issue that we are looking at is very, very extensive in terms of its scope. It's beyond what happened between Pakistan and India. It's a wider trilateral mechanism that we need to consider. Symbolism is a very important part of this story. Three leaders, Azerbaijani President, Prime Minister of Pakistan and President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, meeting here in Lachin, which is a very symbolic place, not far away from the conditional Azerbaijani-Armenian border, place which was prior to 2020 had been associated in an Azerbaijani national mindset with a sense of loss, with a sense of the loss of sovereignty, and now after 2020 with a sense of pride, renewal and restoration of territorial integrity and sovereignty. The symbolism is abundantly there.
Our nations are bound by shared history, culture and values. We have rejoiced in each other's successes and been there for each other during difficult times. Azerbaijan, Turkey and Pakistan have always championed sovereignty, territorial integrity and justice. We once again express gratitude for the political and moral support of Turkey and Pakistan from the first days of the 44-day patriotic war in 2020. Azerbaijan, in turn, has always stood by Turkey and Pakistan. Today, we once again reaffirm the unity of our peoples.
And of course, during the bilateral meeting, three countries, their leaders expressed their support for each other, reiterated some of the fundamental positions that have been maintained for some considerable time. Pakistan and Turkey are the two countries that recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity and sovereignty in early 90s. And also, of course, Azerbaijani leader President Ilham Aliyev congratulated his Turkish counterpart on their victory over PKK, organization which recognized a terrorist organization by practically everybody, Turkey, UK, United States and European Union, and paid his tribute to President Erdogan for resolving this issue in a manner befitting the strength of the Turkish state. And also, of course, there was the words of support have been expressed for the position of Pakistan as well. Connectivity, defense cooperation were the key elements discussed, and also, of course, space industry. artificial intelligence, space technology have been the subjects mentioned by leaders. And in the light of what happened, of course, we should also bear in mind that 28th of May is a very symbolic day from Pakistan's perspective as well, because that's a day on which Pakistan was designated as a nuclear power, and being a nuclear power is an important ingredient of this nation's international standing.
Pakistan is very fortunate to have sincere brothers like Turkey and Azerbaijan, who have stood together with us as impregnable rocks and whom we can trust without a second thought, unhesitatingly, as brothers in arms, forever united in peace, justice and morality.
By the way, this is a second trilateral meeting, with the first one being held last year in early July on the sidelines of the 24th meeting of the heads of state of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, when Azerbaijani, Pakistani and Turkish leaders met in trilateral format. This meeting is the second meeting. This symbolizes more than unity. It also, of course, will have some implications for their regional geopolitical dynamics, for the regional landscape, because quite clearly the alliance that Azerbaijan and Turkey shaped in this region is an important factor. Post-2020 geopolitical landscape has massively changed by virtue of Azerbaijan's victory and the recovery of its territorial integrity, this giving rise to further Turkish influence in the wider Caucasian region.
We are three brotherly countries that share common ideals based on mutual love, respect and trust, and benefiting from the same cultural environment. We are further strengthening the ties between our countries, which have a population of approximately 350 million and an economic power of $1.5 trillion. I would like to emphasize that we are behind every step aimed at transforming our alliance into a strategic partnership.
And Pakistan, being Azerbaijan's strategic partner and also in close ties, having close ties with Turkey, is also part of the wider Eurasian landscape. It is very interesting and important to note that during the meeting, importance of the organization like the Islamic Cooperation Organization, Economic Cooperation Organization, which actually, amongst other countries, involve Azerbaijan, Turkey and Pakistan, of course, have been mentioned. And this meeting should also be taken into account and examined in the light of Azerbaijan's latest drive, lately particularly augmented drive in connection with Global South. Of course, when it comes to Global South, it's a very, very vague notion. But definitely Azerbaijan and Pakistan are there, whereas Turkey is a country with its own characteristics, but also closely involved with that framework. So today was very important in terms of entrenching, in terms of reiterating some of the long-held positions. It was also a day wherein a lot of important symbolic messages have been sent as well. Well, Orkan Amashov, A-News.
On the occasion of Azerbaijan's Independence Day, we're bringing you a story of history. As the Russian Empire collapsed over 100 years ago, the South Caucasus briefly reimagined its future through bold experiments in independence.
In the final decades of the Russian Empire, the South Caucasus was home to a mosaic of nationalities: Armenians, Georgians, and Azerbaijanis, each with distinct identities but living under centralized Russian control. The 1917 Russian Revolution shattered that control, unleashing a power vacuum and a scramble for self-determination. As the Bolsheviks seized power in the north and the Ottoman Empire advanced from the west, the South Caucasus became a geopolitical crossroads, torn between collapsing empires, foreign invasions, and rising internal tensions. After the collapse of the Russian Empire, a short-lived attempt to unify the South Caucasus emerged. The Transcaucasian Democratic Federative Republic, declared in April 1918. But fundamental differences between Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan in national goals, foreign policy, and positions toward the Ottomans and Bolsheviks led to its rapid collapse. By May, the federation dissolved, with Georgia the first to withdraw. Influential Georgian political and intellectual groups did not acknowledge Soviet power, which was established in Russia after the revolution of 1917. In Georgia, the path to independence began with a national convention in Tbilisi in November 1917. The National Council of Georgia was elected, and on 26 May 1918, the Democratic Republic of Georgia was proclaimed. Led by the Menshevik Noé Ramishvili, Georgia quickly built democratic institutions. The 1919 elections brought a multi-party parliament, with protections for minorities, women's rights, and even the abolition of the death penalty in its first constitution, adopted on 21 February 1921. But just 4 days later, under cannon fire, the Red Army invaded, and on 25 February, Georgia was annexed by Soviet forces. The Azerbaijan Democratic Republic was declared just 2 days after Georgia, on 28 May 1918, in Tbilisi, because Baku was under Soviet control at the time. The city was governed by Sovnarkom, the highest executive authority of the Soviet republics. This was followed by the brief rule of the Central Caspian dictatorship that replaced the Baku Commune after the July coup of 1918. Meanwhile, the Azerbaijani National Council, led by Mamad Amin Rasulzadeh of the Musavat Party, governed from Ganja. On 15 September 1918, Ottoman and Azerbaijani forces entered Baku in the decisive Battle of Baku, liberating the city and restoring it as the capital. Azerbaijan went on to become the first secular parliamentary republic in the Muslim East. The republic lasted only 23 months, until 28 April 1920, when Red Army entered Baku, and Azerbaijan was incorporated into the Soviet Union. Armenia also declared independence on 28 May 1918. Led by the Armenian Revolutionary Federation, known as Dashnaks, the First Republic of Armenia emerged in the midst of war, famine, and displacement. The Batum Treaty in June 1918 forced Armenia to cede 20,000 square kilometers to the Ottomans. Aram Manoukian, widely regarded as the founding father of the Republic, played a vital role in repelling Ottoman advances and stabilizing the state under extreme conditions. But without unity or strong defenses, Armenia became vulnerable to outside threats. By December 1920, it fell to the Bolsheviks and became the Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic. Despite lasting barely 2 years, the first South Caucasus republics laid enduring foundations. They established currencies, universities, and constitutions, promoted native languages, and supported the development of theatre, literature, and music. Yerevan State University was founded in 1919. In Azerbaijan, Baku State University opened the same year. Young Republic of Azerbaijan granted women full voting rights, ahead of many Western nations. In Georgia, women entered parliament and helped draft the first constitution. Armenian banknotes, printed in Armenian, Russian, and French, symbolized sovereignty. At the Paris Peace Conference, South Caucasus leaders sought international recognition. US President Woodrow Wilson acknowledged their aspirations, though global powers prioritized stability over new borders. "We do not want to divide the world into small pieces," Wilson told the Azerbaijani delegation. Yet for the peoples of the South Caucasus, unity proved impossible. Still, their brief independence shaped national identities, launched institutions, and created symbols that re-emerged after 1991, when these nations finally reclaimed the independence first imagined in 1918.
A new intelligence report out of the US suggests that Moscow is trying to bring Georgia back into its sphere of influence. The report also touches on Georgia's Russian-occupied territories. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more in Tbilisi.
The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, one of the most trusted branches of American defense analysis, has released its annual Global Threat Assessment, and Georgia is firmly on its radar. According to the report, Moscow is almost certainly seeking to bring back Georgia to the sphere of its influence. It notes that following Georgia's October parliamentary elections, the ruling Georgian Dream Party has shaped an environment that allows for deeper involvement from Russia in the country. The report also addressed Armenia, citing worsening ties with Moscow and efforts by Russia to discredit Yerevan's pro-Western leadership. This broader picture of Russian influence extends directly to Georgia's occupied territories. In Abkhazia, the de facto leadership continues to closely align with Moscow. Speaking to the Russian state media at Caucasian Investment Forum in Russia, Abkhazia's de facto president, Badra Gunba, praised Russian military forces' presence in the region, calling them essential for peace and stability. He highlighted cooperation with Russia's defense ministry and the significance of both the 7th military base and Russia's Federal Security Service border unit stationed in the region. Around the same time, Russia's defense minister, Andrei Belousov, met with Abkhazia's de facto defense chief, describing Abkhazia as a reliable ally and underlining its efforts to create a joint defense space in the framework of their strategic partnership. The statements reflect ongoing shifts of regional cooperation as Moscow strengthens its ties with breakaway entities while distancing itself from Armenia's pro-Western leadership. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
Russian investors are looking into Afghanistan's natural resources. Following an offer for a joint oil project, a new meeting was held on investments in the country's minerals sector. Our Tamim Bahis reports from Kabul.
In another sign of growing international interest in Afghanistan's natural resources, a high-level meeting was held this week between Afghan officials and Russian private sector representatives. The acting Minister of Mines and Petroleum, Hidayatullah Badri, met with the head of the Russian company, Turkhan Extraction. During the meeting, the two sides discussed investment opportunities in Afghanistan's mineral sector, with a particular focus on jade mines. The Russian side praised the favorable investment environment in the country and expressed a clear interest in launching new projects. The acting minister welcomed the interest and assured full cooperation in line with Afghanistan's mining laws and regulations. He emphasized Kabul's commitment to facilitating responsible foreign investment in the sector. You might remember that just last month, Russian private sector investors announced a $500 million plan to build a major oil extraction plant in partnership with a local Afghan company. Now, this latest engagement in the mining sector signals a growing Russian interest in Afghanistan's vast natural resources. As Russian companies continue to explore economic opportunities in Afghanistan, officials here say they are ready to work with international partners who align with the country's investment laws and development goals. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Kazakhstan says it can increase the flow of oil through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium by more than 20%. Our Fariza Kalimurzina has the details.
According to the press service of the government of Kazakhstan, the Caspian pipeline's capacity can now increase from 67 to 81.5 million tons of oil per year. In the Kazakh section, the volume may grow from 53.7 to 72.5 million tons. Prime Minister Oljas Biktenev stressed the pipeline's strategic importance. He said the government is committed to ensuring its smooth operation and is ready to provide support for stable oil supplies. CPC General Director Nikolai Gorba shared the results for 2024. He also reported the completion of repairs at the Krobotkivskaya oil pumping station. The station resumed operations on May 23rd. It had been damaged by a drone attack. Ukraine confirmed the attack on CPC facility and warned that such operations would continue. Experts say the damage could reduce Kazakh oil flow by up to 30%. But still, Kazakhstan is increasing oil exports through the Russian route. The Caspian Pipeline Consortium links oil fields in western Kazakhstan and Russia to the Novosibirsk terminal on the Black Sea. The pipeline is 1,500 kilometers long. It carries over 80% of Kazakhstan's oil exports. In between January and April this year, 23.9 million tons of oil were shipped through the system. Of that, 21.5 million tons came from Kazakhstan. Parisa Kalemurзина, E-News in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A-News.